Michelle, obviously, you know what this stuff was all about, right? It's not a surprise that we showed up tonight.
Almost overnight, she went from a possible witness to a person of interest in the case of a missing mom of 5 from New Canaan.
We see state police, New Canaan police, searching downtown Hartford.
So what's that about? Why is the scene moved to Hartford?
You need to tell us what you know about Jennifer's murder and Forrest Dulles.
The girlfriend in the middle of a bitter and brutal divorce battle.
The stuff you were throwing out, we have. And it's all Jennifer. It belongs to Jennifer. Do you understand?
Turned high-profile murder investigation.
Guys, what happened to Jennifer, Michelle? You're gonna do the right thing, Michelle?
We're taking you inside the trial of Michelle Troconis.
And thanks for joining us once again for Inside the Trial of Michelle Troconis. I'm Shannon Miller. We are capping off another week of dramatic testimony in Stamford. For the first time, the jury heard from Michelle Troconis, but not from the witness stand. Prosecutors played video of interviews she gave to police after her first arrest. Investigators pressed Michelle about what she knew about the whereabouts of Forrest Dulles and Jennifer Dulles' disappearance.
Fotis killed Jennifer.
No.
Okay? This is a fact. We know this. We need to find Jennifer.
The defendant, emotional in the courtroom Thursday. We saw tears from Michelle Troconis as the video of that first interview she gave was played for the jury. It's the first time we have seen this reaction from Michelle Troconis in the trial. NBC Connecticut's Kevin Geis joins us now once again from Stamford Superior Court. And Kevin, this interview happened just hours after Troconis' first arrest back in June of 2019. She had spent the night behind bars before this hours-long interview. And Kevin, there was a lot to hear here.
Absolutely, Shannon. Jurors got the chance to hear from Michelle Troconis herself as she was recapping May 24th, 2019. That was the day that Jennifer disappeared, all of it happening at the New Canaan Police Department following her first arrest. Detective John Kimball was the lead investigator in the case, and he conducted this interview with Detective Corey Clabby. Also in the room, besides the defendant, Michelle Troconis' attorney at the time, Andrew Bowman. In court Thursday, prosecutors stopping in the video multiple times to make note of changes Troconis would make in future interviews. Among them, that she was with Fotis the morning Jennifer disappeared.
Can you tell me with 100% certainty that you saw Fotis in the house on the morning of the 24th?
And when I woke up, yes.
At what time?
7:40 the alarm, 7:42 I was in the room.
And for how long of a time did you see him?
6:40.
Okay. And how long of a time did you see him for?
No, just in the shower and then I left.
That claim of 6:40 shower with Fotis was also in the photocopy of a handwritten timeline found at 4 Jefferson Crossing, but that statement did not remain consistent.
Throughout the course of those interviews, did the defendant always maintain that Forrest Dulles had woken up in her presence and gotten in the shower with her?
No.
When was the first time she indicated that that did not happen?
Again, Your Honor, I'm going to object that the video speaks for itself and allow him to editorialize and give opinions about what was said and when is improper. And I object to all of this because the video will speak for itself, and he's being asked to give his opinion on what was said and when.
Kimball testified that he didn't know about those handwritten timelines when he conducted this first interview with Troconis. And we are expecting to continue to make our way through 2 other interviews that Troconis did with investigators and continue to hear from lead investigator John Kimball. Shannon.
All right, Kevin, so the jury are going to have to decide now if these interviews Michelle gave to police work for or against her, changing her story about if Fotis was home the morning of Jennifer's murder. Whether that was a mistake or intentional is something investigators laid out in their arrest warrant. But Attorney John Schoenhorn says many of those points were taken out of context, right?
Absolutely. Schoenhorn continues to maintain that they were taken out of context, that she was being sort of misled by investigators. She was being pushed by investigators throughout these interviews, as well as she was confused and tired after spending the night at the New Canaan Police Department. He claims that she was in no place to be giving any sort of statement or any sort of interview following her arrest.
All right, I want to get now, Kevin, to this part. Investigators asked Troconis about this video here on Albany Avenue showing her reaching out of Fotis Dulos' Ford Raptor. Here's how Michelle explains what she was doing.
Is that you, Michelle? And is that Fotis?
Yes.
Okay.
That's me.
Do you know what you're doing there?
Yes, I'm cleaning like this.
What are you cleaning the ground for?
Because I put my gum and I threw it and it was sticky.
Fotis comes and takes something from you and he throws it in the sewer. What was that? We see it on the video.
But he doesn't take anything
No,
from
he
me.
does, because we see it happen. And we have it.
And we retrieved what was thrown in the sewer.
So I'm just going to tell you right now, starting from the morning, there's some stuff that we know that you're not being honest about.
Now, again, this camera here showed Michelle reaching. It also showed Fotis apparently dumping altered license plates in a sewer. It's now going to be up to the jury to decide exactly what led to that moment. Now, yesterday's testimony from Detective Kimball finally brought to light a controversial claim by state police about the number of stops Fotis Dulos' Ford Raptor made along Albany Avenue. Take a listen.
I don't know, a little bit.
How long?
Like how long it took him?
Yeah, did it take a short time or did it take a long time?
No, I don't know, a minute, 2 minutes, I don't know how long it takes.
I'm just going to stop you here, and I'm going to tell your attorney. Over 30 stops over a 4+ mile radius length of a certain street in the north end.
So the detectives there say that the Raptor made more than 30 stops along Albany Avenue. Attorney John Schoenhorn later clarified that number shortly after he started representing Michelle. Here is when Attorney McGinnis asked Detective Kimball to explain how that first number first came up.
Detective Kimball, you just indicated that there were over 30 stops. Were you referring to the Raptor?
I was, yes.
Okay. Was that information accurate?
It was not.
Are you familiar, well, firstly, Detective, in your experience, have you taken any interrogation courses?
Yes.
All right. And are you familiar with something known as a ruse?
Yes.
All right. What is a ruse?
Ruse is presenting false information to a subject.
Intentionally, correct?
Intentionally.
All right. Was this an intentional ruse?
It was not, no.
Okay. Why did you indicate that there have been 30 stops at the Raptor?
The 30 stop information was the information I had been given at the time. It turned out later to be inaccurate.
Now, we did learn, though, yesterday from Detective Kimball that a ruse was eventually used during Michelle's interrogation. Detective Kimball also showed Troconis a screen grab from that video taken on Albany Avenue showing a man pull what looks like a bloody pillow out of the garbage can and then putting it back. Investigators say it was one of the trash cans Fotis Dulos dumped bags in.
This gentleman comes up to the garbage can and pulls that out. What does that look like to you?
A bag?
What's the red stuff?
Blood.
It's blood. And that's Jennifer's blood. And that's a pillow from her garage that's missing. So you need to start being honest with us about
I don't know anything about that pillow.
About where Fotis was in the morning.
Now, prosecutors asked Detective Kimball why he told Michelle that the pillow had Jennifer's blood on it. Kimball testified that was strategic.
Detective Clavey indicated that that was a pillow from Jennifer's garage. Did you ever verify that?
We did not.
That was never recovered, correct?
Correct.
And similarly, that Jennifer's blood was on it, that was also never verified, correct?
That is correct.
Would this be an example of a ruse, Detective?
It would be, yes.
Now, the use of deception in policing is controversial. The governor just signed a bill last year making any confessions gained using deceptive tactics inadmissible in court. Of course, there was no confession here by Michelle Troconis, who says she does not know what happened to Jennifer and that she is innocent. Judge Randolph, as you'll recall, and ruled, Kevin, that while investigators used deceptive tactics in their questioning of Michelle, he again would allow that interview, those videos, to be played for the jury. But Kevin, it's something John Schoenhorn will likely bring up during cross-examination of course, which will happen after the jury sees the second interview.
Absolutely. He brought up this sort of ruse tactics in the suppression hearing to have these videos tossed out. Ultimately, like you said, the judge allowed them in, but it's more than likely that John Schoenhorn will continue to bring these up in the defense, trying to make the point that some of the inconsistencies in her story, some of the statements that she made that may have been not truthful at the time, definitely were part of what state police were pushing for, and ultimately he could stake his claim in that defense more than, most other things inside those interviews.
Kevin, we know that Fotis refused to speak or cooperate with investigators for answers on his estranged wife Jennifer's disappearance. After Fotis and Michelle were both arrested, they would never stay under the same roof again. Now, everyone in this room, here in this interview room, agreed that Michelle's life with Fotis, as she knew it, was over.
We believe that you were kind of dragged down a certain path, okay?
So he used me.
Isn't that what Fotis does? He was with somebody else and met Jennifer and moved on. He was with Jennifer and met you and moved on. The pattern, correct? Do you see what was happening here? Do you think that was not going to happen to you? We know Fotis. We've looked into Fotis. Just hear me out. If Fotis was not home in the morning, which I know he wasn't, he knows he wasn't. Your attorney even knows, based on what we've told him, that Fotis was not home.
So maybe he wasn't
No,
home.
you know if he was, and you need to tell us the truth. Because this is very important. The stuff you were throwing out, we have. And it's all Jennifer. It belongs to Jennifer.
Oh my God.
Do you understand?
Now, detectives also asked about the relationship between Fotis and Jennifer at the time. Michelle described the contentious custody battle and said it had been a nightmare ever since she moved in with Fotis. Now, throughout this interview, detectives tell Michelle that they had been worried about her safety after Jennifer's disappearance. Detective Kimball explains why.
I learned that the interaction between Fotis Doulos and Michelle Troconis on the evening of May 31st was concerning because Fotis Doulos was overly concerned with Michelle Troconis's statements and conduct, and was exhibiting behavior that was concerning. One thing was he was staring at her, and we don't know if it was an intimidation factor or if he was trying to message her in some way, but his physical behavior was concerning towards the defendant, Michelle Troconis.
And so based on that, did you have concerns for her safety when you interviewed her on June 2nd?
Yes.
So, Kevin, Detective Corey Clabby is the investigator who witnessed this behavior in that interrogation video. He called that stare from Fotis Doulos, quote, the most evil look he has ever seen, and that he looked as if Fotis was staring a hole into Michelle's head. This is the first time that we are hearing about investigators' concern for Michelle Troconis' safety when it came to her boyfriend, Fotis Doulos. So what, Kevin, do you think that this could mean for both the prosecution and the defense?
Right, we hear safety brought up multiple times during the interview, and it's interesting that, prosecutors are sort of walking through all of these safety points. They're also hearing testimony about safety. We haven't heard much from the defense as far as safety goes. He hasn't really brought up Michelle Troconis' safety at any point, even in sort of the pretrial hearings and through the trial so far. But we're not really sure exactly if the defense is going to try to sort of make a safety claim at some point during this trial.
It will be interesting to see if attorney John Schoenhorn tries to introduce that dynamic between Michelle and Fotis leading up to Jennifer's disappearance. Kevin, the jury also saw a video of Michelle Troconis being read her Miranda rights, and once again, the issue of a potential language barrier was brought up in court.
And did you communicate with the defendant in English or Spanish?
In English.
Do you speak Spanish?
I do not.
Did the defendant ever request the assistance of an interpreter while you were speaking with her?
She did not.
Did Mr. Bowman ever request that an interpreter be present for the interview?
No.
Did you have any concerns about the defendant's ability to understand the English language as you spoke with her?
No.
Now, Troconis was also given forms in English and Spanish outlining her rights and police say she acknowledged them in writing. Kevin, do we expect Michelle's rights or her ability to speak English coming up from John Schoenhorn's cross-examination?
At this point, it's not likely. Prosecutors and the defense sort of came to an agreement before we got into this portion of testimony that it wasn't going to come up, at least at this point. The door is open for defense attorney John Schoenhorn. He could bring it up if he wanted to, but the prosecution made clear that if he brings it up, that would open the door for them, and they could sort of open a line of questioning as well into the language barrier. It was a huge part of the suppression hearings as well, but at this point, it doesn't seem that it will come up, but it could later on in the trial.
Kevin, guys, live for us once again at Stanford Superior Court. You're going to head back into the courtroom where that jury is going to hear more of that second interview that Michelle Troconis gave to police. We appreciate your insight. Still ahead on Inside the Trial, Michelle Troconis. We'll talk once again with former Hartford Police homicide detective and the representative for state police at the time, Brian Foley, about these interviews, the tactics that were used, and what they wanted to learn from Michelle. And welcome back to Inside the Trial of Michelle Troconis. We are joined once again by Brian Foley, the former spokesperson for the state police commissioner at the time of the Jennifer Dulos investigation. Brian, we so appreciate you coming back again, especially after Detective Kimball took the stand yesterday to listen to these interrogation videos. I want to go back to what Kimball and Detective Clappy told Michelle that they were concerned for her safety, that they noticed this moment that Fotis Dulos was glaring at her. She had her kind of head in her hands. This was the day before when they were giving over fingerprints, DNA. Talk more about that moment where investigators were actually concerned for her to even leave their presence and go home with Fotis that night.
So this is a main witness, and the fact of the matter is you don't want to lose the main witness. The state police know and the detectives know there's a killer out there. The killer, whoever killed Jennifer, could possibly kill this witness as well. So you have that innate concern before you start even identifying who these people are and who's involved. As you're talking to the witnesses in these interviews, you can start to develop how much danger they're in. And when they see the Fotis stare at her like that, and the cops have that sense, this woman's in danger. And respond to so many domestics. They've been investigate so many domestics, especially when they get to the level of major crimes. You kind of assess, do I need to tail this woman? But typically in that type of situation, they're going to tell her, you're in danger. You need to lock your doors. You need to stay with somebody else, maybe. They go through some safety procedures where they're calling 911 if anything happens like that. That's what typically happens in those situations when they're concerned for. Investigators would have loved to talk to Fotis Dulos at this point, but he wasn't talking at all. Tell me more about that and what you were trying to get from Michelle. So once the suspect attorney's up or lawyer's up, as we say, now your best way to get information is going to be from witnesses. So that really puts the weight of this interrogation, the videos you're seeing with Detective Kimball, that really puts so much weight on it. And there's so much strategy. An incredible amount of training for a homicide detective for interview and interrogation, advanced interview and interrogation. And we discussed this during the interviews. They're reading her body language. They're looking at her eye movements. They're looking at everything to try to figure out, is she lying? And there's certain cues you give when your body gives, when eye access recall. There's just so much to learn here and so much weight put on it. You've lost, the suspect has lawyered up. So now the interview with Troconis, and you're seeing they're playing the videos of it, that is the most important part of that investigation at that point. These interviews she agreed to do with her attorney present. Talk about the moment yesterday in court when Detective Kimball clarifies something that came up early in the investigation about just how many stops Fotis Dulos made along Albany Avenue. Initially, it was reported that there were 30 stops. We later learned that there were just 3. They clarified that moment in court yesterday. But, for those of us who were hearing the details of this investigation early on, your mind kind of starts to wonder what could be involved with 30 stops. So can you talk just about, in an investigation, how information, numbers, details like this are fluid? Yes, things change, especially with technology. You might get an initial number from a cell phone company of how many stops. Detectives might be watching video and they're trying to watch at how many stops, and the video might not be the best from one angle. And the numbers change. You know, is it 30? Is it 20? Is it 21? So things are fluid. The key for the detective, and he's doing a good job of it, is not to appear deceptive to the jury. Just to admit, yeah, I had that number before. That changed. It was a different number. That happens. And so as long as you're not deceptive, you know, as to why they stopped so many times, your guess is as good as mine. I have my theories, and they're grim as to why he stopped so many times in Hartford and got rid of that evidence. But that's all the play out here.
Detective Kimball also, you know, in his testimony, admitting to the jury when he was using certain tactics, so to speak. We learn about this term called a ruse, and that's when he admits that they showed Michelle Troconis this picture of that bloody pillow. They say that it's Jennifer's blood, that the pillow came from Jennifer's house, and that's even though that the pillow was never found or never tested. Again, the prosecutor asking Detective Kimball, is this a ruse? And he admits, yes. Can you explain this technique, the legality of it all when it comes to interrogations?
So first, you have this, the pillow was never recovered, but anyone that has any bit of common sense is looking at that bloody pillow coming out where he threw evidence in, and that's what that is. And so you say that. So being deceptive in an interview, and Detective Kimball was, you know, using this ruse technique, very common. It's become, there's new legislation now as to when and how you can use it. But look, as an investigator, you think to yourself, this person's lying to me, and lying to me nonstop and changing the story so many times. I'm going to try and throw a lie back at them to get them back on the truth. As long as you're open about it when it comes out in front of a jury, and look, when you use that ruse, that's not your only evidence. You're using that to gather further evidence. So hopefully the witness, in this case, Troconis, she offers up something that will point these detectives in another direction. So it's not what's said there that's going to be the key piece of evidence. You use that ruse to get pointed in the right direction to gather further evidence elsewhere.
All right, yeah, and it's also important to note that throughout some of those questioning, that Michelle Troconis said, I don't know. I am innocent in all this. I don't know how I got brought into all this. So It's kind of that rerouting of the questioning to try to get any information. I want to talk coming up after this more about that reaction from Michelle Troconis and just, you know, more about that moment where investigators tell her that they believe that Fotis Dulos has killed Jennifer Dulos. Let's talk about that after this. Much more coming up on Inside the Trial of Michelle Troconis. Straight ahead, we'll talk more with Brian again about the role that these interview videos play in the case. Stay with us. All right, we are back now once again with Brian Foley, the former spokesperson for the state police commissioner who led all of the media announcement and interaction in this case at the time of Jennifer's disappearance. One of the big moments and takeaways from those interview videos, Brian, is when those investigators tell Michelle Troconis that they believe Fotis Dulos killed the mother of his children. They then go into this is what was found. The jury is now going to decide, because they're watching all of these videos in their entirety and make their own assessment. But what did state police make of her reaction? Was this I'm going to let you respond to that. When they, you know, dump that information on her, what are moments like that meaning to those investigators when they're dumping that heavy bit of information on the person they're trying to get answers from?
So a lot of times that information, when you hit them hard with the heaviest facts, you're doing that so that the witness understands the weight or the gravity of this type of case. And make no mistake about it, as I was saying before, they're watching everything. And, you know, look, about 10 years ago, they started requiring these interviews to be on video. And this is on video, and it's fantastic. You know, cops at first didn't love the fact that these interviews were going to be videotaped, but this is perfect for a jury to see that visceral reaction of that witness. And the cops are reading everything, and they're going outside, and they'll leave the interview room, and they're watching. And it's not necessarily like through the mirror like it is on TV, but they're watching on video what her reactions are. They'll replay it again. So having the video here is fantastic. To watch that visceral reaction, that's heavy, and you know, it's heavy for I'm sure anyone trying to sit through those interviews, especially with the weight of guilt sitting on your shoulders.
There's a moment during this interview where they dump part of that you know, initial revelation that they believe photos killed Jennifer, and they understand that it's a heavy, or at least it appears to be a heavy moment for her. They walk out of the room and they leave Michelle Troconis, in the room for a while. She puts her head down on the table for what appears to be several seconds, if not a few minutes. That too, they're watching. That's part of the entire interview process.
Yep, and look at the fact of the matter is, you've just hit that person with it. You want that person to confess. Sometimes a person needs some time to regroup and rethink and reapproach how they're going to do it. And you hope that they give up and that they just fess up and cough it up and give you everything. So yes, those breaks, everything is by design. Everything is by strategy in these interviews.
Again, she kept telling them, I don't know about Jennifer's disappearance. And again, going to be up to the jury now to decide and make what they want out of these videos. Brian, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. And that wraps up our exclusive Inside the Trial Michelle Troconis streaming special. You can watch the trial live on our streaming channels when court starts around 10 a.m. We'll have live coverage on ABC Connecticut starting with the news at 4, and be sure to join us again on weekdays at 9 a.m. for more in-depth analysis of the trial as it continues to unfold.